take back the slides. Okay. So this is what I was discussing, the main objectives of in our sessions. So these are the main topics that we are going to cover, and the detailed discussion and lab will be covered in our daily classes. And so starting with, we will be starting with our module called preparing and installing configuration of SQL Server installation. So yesterday we just briefed about few of the concepts related to preparation of the SQL Server. So we will recap them and then we will proceed with installation. And then maybe SQL Server. Yesterday, as I said, SQL Server journey started from 1989. So initially they introduced the SQL Server 1.0. So, but in their journey they invented multiple features and they developed each versions, and they launched, they released multiple versions. Currently we are having 2016. So as before we install SQL Server, what kind of version we are going to install? As I said, SQL Server 2000 till SQL Server 2000 is out of supported by Microsoft. So in few scenarios, still they are giving a extended support. Very minimal support they are providing. From 2005 to 2014, they are extended. I mean, they are giving their complete support to the end users. The one which we have to consider is version depending upon our needs. So what kind of version so we need to install? It can be SQL Server 2005, 2008, 2008 R2, SQL Server 2012. And then after considering the version, we will be deciding few of the things, what kind of edition we are going to. So we are having different editions. The reason why we need to have multiple editions in the market, the reason is to customize the features. The second thing is cost effective. Maybe few applications doesn't require all the features. So for them to minimize the features and the cost can be minimized, so that they will pay what they need. And what are the hardware requirements in my box, and what I need to have in my machine to install SQL Server, and what kind of operating system is mine. If it is I hope you might have heard about 32-bit operating system and 64-bit operating system. Yes? Yeah. So based on the operating system, we will be choosing appropriate compatibility SQL Server bit. So in earlier we are getting a different software for each operating system type. If it is a 32-bit operating system, we have to install only SQL Server with 32-bit. So we will be getting different EXEs. Now from SQL Server 2008 onwards, they have customized. So our install can recognize what kind of operating system is, and it automatically load appropriate DLL. And the next one is exploring the instance of SQL Server. So here this one we will discuss detail in the next slide. And then the licensing, what kind of license we have to take, and what are the security considerations and collation settings. So these are the things we need to consider while we are preparing for SQL Server. So these things we will discuss in detail. Okay. So editions. So we are having the market. We'll have Express Edition, Workgroup Edition, Standard, Enterprise, Developer, and Web Mobile Application. So the Enterprise Edition, this is the complete build. We can say this is a highly scalable and all features, what the Microsoft has developed in SQL Server, all features we will get in Enterprise Edition. Whereas in Standard and Developer, these are these editions is mainly used for development or small scale industries. So if we don't want few of the features, let's say if the application, the project is in a developing phase, then we can load SQL Server in our application boxes with the developer and standard edition. Whereas coming to the mobile edition, it's a compact database for a smart handheld device. So what they will do for the custom, they will customize the features and they will develop a new kind of version for the specific company or specific organization. So in the next slides, we can have a comparison between all the editions and which edition can be fitted into what kind of operating system. So here, if you see here, in a Windows Server 2008, there we can install all kind of editions. Similarly, Windows Vista, we cannot load on a 32-bit, we cannot load Express and other editions, we can do it. So this is a small understanding table. So here in most of the systems we can install Enterprise Edition and Develop and Standard Editions. This is just for our understanding. And after our edition and version requirements, we need to think about what are the hardware requirement. So how much processor we have, how much memory we have, and so whether my disk is having free space. So currently we are considering only for loading SQL Server installation. So after we do installation and configuring, later we think about our database and a free space will be given to our database and the database files. That thing we will carry it out in next module. So to install a SQL Server, at least we need to have 1 GB of processor. So recommended minimum is 1 GB. So higher always a server means it will have more gigahertz. Coming to the processor, it should have minimum of 512 MB. Even our machines will have minimum of 4 GB. In that case, we will not expect a server with 512 MB. So the server, what I mean to say, now we use Google search engine. So Google search engine will be running on some many servers. Similarly, our Google or Facebook. So whenever we do uploads, the data will be saving somewhere. That is called servers. And disk space. For database component, we require minimum 280 MB of disk space. So analysis services, reporting services, integration services, client components, these are the additional components in the SQL Server. So we will be discussing those when we are doing installation. And apart from these hardware configurations, we will be thinking of software components. So those are for SQL Server, we need .NET Framework 3.5 for SQL Server 2008 as a prerequirement. In our box, if we don't have .NET Framework, it will prompt at the time of initial system check. And SQL Server native clients and SQL Server support files. So these three are the prerequirements for software prerequirements for the SQL Server 2008. So one best feature here is if you connect to internet, if these features are available, SQL Server will proceed with installation after compatibility check. If not, it will try to download and install at the time of installation. Yes. So in our course module, we were discussing about here exploring the SQL Server instance. We will discuss little more detail in this slide. So instance nothing but a installation. After the installation of SQL Server is called a SQL Server instance. So in a SQL Server, we are having two types of instances. One is the default instance, the other one is named instance. So what is the default instance? The default instance is the name given to the SQL Server, which is equal to the computer name. So here the server name, I mean to say the box name, is equal to your instance name. That means you need not to specify a name to your SQL Server. Your computer name will be your SQL Server name. And whereas coming to the other one, it's a named instance. So here we will be specifying a name to your SQL Server. So it will be computer name followed by unit name to your SQL Server. So when we are giving a name to SQL Server, there are few considerations. So the length of instance name should not exceed more than 16 characters. And the name is a case sensitive. The other one is few of the keywords, like SQL Server will have few keywords like in, like. Those are the built-in keywords. Those keywords SQL Server will not allow. Those are also called reserved words. Apart from that, SQL Server will not allow few of the special characters, colon, bracket. These are the considerations we have to think while we are choosing the name to your SQL Server. So the main thing is the name should not exceed more than 16 characters. Is it clear?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
I
Ananda,
c-
am I audible to you?
yeah, I cannot hear anything from you, sir.
Now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. So, does anyone have questions till now? So now we have discussed about what kind of SQL server we need. That means the version consideration. The other one is the edition. Later we will check whether my server or box is having the hardware related support and software related support. So and then we will consider of licensing. So here we are having two kinds of licensing. One is per processor and other one is CAL, client access licensing. So per processor, let us say my so when we are buying a license to the SQL server, when we approach Microsoft for licensing, we can choose any one of these two types, per processor or CAL. When we are sure of number of systems we are going to use, at that time we will go for per processor. So in the other case, so when we are not sure how many processes we are going to use and how many connections we are going to use, at that time we go for CAL, client access licensing. So we will take it for 500 users or 1000 users. So like that, a pricing will vary between processor and CAL type. So from the screen, so I can able to see one diagram. Here it says components in my SQL server. Can someone name them? I mean, can someone read them? Maybe we can give it this chance to Pooja. Pooja, can you please read the services, or we can say the features which we
Yeah,
can those are in diagram.
yeah. Service broker, replication, full text search, notification services.
Okay,
Database engine, reporting services, analysis services, integration services.
thank you. Yes, all these we can call it as components in SQL Server. So when we install a SQL Server, these are the components are going to load in the machine. So depending upon our need, we will be choosing the components and features, and we do the installation. The database engine, that is common. The database engine, that means that is the SQL Server database engine. And integration services, that is also called SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. Reporting services, SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services. SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services. These are called Business Intelligence Studio services. Service broker, replication, full text search, and notification, these are belongs to your database engine. The notification service also belongs to your business intelligence studio. Yesterday, Sirisha, you were asking about uh, logical DBA, right? So by using SQL Server, so not only we can handle the tables and the objects, we can handle packages, we can create a reports, okay, those kind of things, like crystal reports. In Java we can call it as crystal reports. For example, we are getting monthly statements. So what it will do, we will create a template, and in the backend we will mention the queries. Let us say customer ID is there. So whenever I choose the customer ID, the report contains his name, his last four digits of his card number, his transaction in the past 30 days, and the credit points, and his balance to pay and due date. These details will be placed in a table form as a form of report. So whenever I want to fetch the data, so I simply need to run a report that can be achieved by using SSRS. So these are the integration services, reporting services, analysis services. These are called business intelligence features. So we will be concentrating more on database engine. So whenever we install a SQL server, the database engine will be loaded. Along with that, if you want to make use of any one of the features, we will be installing integration services, reporting services, analysis services. While installing service broker and the replication, full text search, these are comes with your database engine. So we will see all these things in while we are doing installation. At the time again, I'll bring back to this presentation and I'll show you the comparison. And while we are selecting the features, I will again bring back to this slide. So for each feature, we will see a component service in our services.msc. So whenever we load, the component will be loaded in a SQL server. The corresponding service will be installed in a machine. I mean to say, when I go when we install operating system, few of the mandatory OS related services will be installed. Similarly, whenever you install a feature of .NET framework or any other application, the application related feature will be loaded in it. So I install a Skype. So here you will see a Skype related services. Similarly, when you do a SQL server, you will see each service for each component. One service for database engine, one service for SQL Server agent, one service for SQL Server browser, and one service for BI related component if you choose it. If you don't choose it, you will three kind of mandatory services. One is SQL Server database engine, the other one is SQL Server agent service and browser service. This is what we were discussing: SQL Server service, SQL Server agent service, SQL Server browser service. So whenever we install a SQL Server, these are the three services that by default it will come. If you select any other feature, any BI related tool, we will see another service for SQL Server. And browser service, what is a browser service will do? So browser service, what it will do, it is kind of a pointer. Whenever a request comes from the client, it will route that request to appropriate instance. So I'm just going back to previous presentation here. So when we discuss about instances, we know what is a default instance, what is a named instance, and few of the restrictions while considering the SQL Server name. So here a SQL Server can have only one default instance. That means in a box we can install only one default instance and multiple named instances. Any questions in this? see, I have installed SQL Server 2005 with named instance, and then again I have loaded. I mean, I ran the installation again. I have an instance that is another instance. I named it as name2. Next time I installed a default instance of SQL Server 2008. Again, I try to install SQL Server 2005 with the default instance. Can I able to do it or not? Any guess?
I think no. Only one default instance name we can create.
Correct, exactly. So whatever the version, whatever the edition, a box can have only one default instance. We can have multiple multiple named instances based on the version. So in SQL Server 2005, you can have 49 named instances, one default instance. Whereas coming to SQL Server 2008, the number it moved to 3 digit. It's around 249 instances we can install. So whenever we consider to install, we have to think of your hardware requirements and software requirements. So if your server, your box is capable to load multiple instances, we will choose it. Correct? So whenever we do an installation, one SQL Server instance will be loaded. Anyone dropped? I got a beep. So this is clear, choosing the SQL Server instance and the name to the SQL instance, how the combination between the named instance and default instance, the versions between 2005 and 2008. Any question in this topic? No? Yes? No? Okay. Next. So here the preparation of SQL Server, we discussed editions and the hardware requirement and the initial SQL Server and the licensing. The other one is SQL Server security. Why we have to think of security initially only? So before I didn't install my SQL Server, even I didn't see my SQL Server database. Why I have to think of my security of my SQL Server? Any comments on this? Even I haven't ran the exe file. Before itself, why I have to think of my security considerations to my SQL Server database? Any wild guesses? Naveen, any answer from your end?
Before installing, no idea.
Yeah, it's to
Okay. Yes. So the reason why we are doing installation, so at the time of installation, we will have an option to restrict the use of our SQL Server. So after installation, the moment we are done with our installation, who all are need to connect? here two things: customizing our security after installation, while doing minimizing the risk while installing itself. Here we will be considering the security things while doing installation itself. The first thing is we are choosing the authentication. The other one is log on service type. So in authentication in SQL Server we are having two types of authentications. One is SQL Server authentication, the other one is Windows authentication. In SQL Server authentication we have to specify the user ID and password to connect to the SQL Server. Whereas coming to the Windows authentication, the SQL Server will not authenticate at the time of connection. When you make a connection to the box, or it can be in a domain level, it will be authenticated and it will allow you to connect to the SQL Server. So that's the reason while we are performing the SQL Server installation, it's mandatory to select any one of the authentication. So here we are having two types of authentication modes: Windows authentication mode and mixed authentication mode. Windows authentication mode allows only Windows users, whereas mixed authentication mode, it will allow SQL authentication and Windows authentication users. So like how we have Windows authentication mode, if you see authentication type, we have two kind of authentication types. Out of these two authentication types, SQL Server have two modes. Those modes are Windows authentication mode and mixed authentication mode. In Windows authentication mode, only the Windows users can able to make use of SQL Server, whereas mixed, SQL users plus Windows users can able to make use of SQL Server. Similarly, we don't have only SQL authentication. That means allowing only SQL Server users to make use of SQL Server. So any reason for this? Why we cannot keep only like a SQL authentication? Naga?
I think in SQL Server we can save a lot of data that the Windows authentication people, they're not supposed to see that data. That's why maybe I'm thinking like that.
Okay. Yes.
That's why they
So when
prefer
we
to.
modes, yeah. So only SQL authentication is not possible. The reason is it is SQL Server. Microsoft SQL Server is a platform dependency. Right? We discussed about this, right? It runs on only Windows. So without Windows, you cannot have SQL Server. So that is the reason allowing only SQL users is not possible in authentication. Okay, any doubts in authentication types and other authentication modes? Okay, let me jump on to next slide. Here the next one is collation settings. The collation settings is related to SQL Server database engine, and like when we are using our mobile phone, we are customizing our mobile phone to a particular font, screensaver, and language, and few things. Similarly, SQL Server while installation, we are specifying the collation. That means whether case sensitivity is required or not, what is the default language, what is the default time zone. These kind of few settings that we are specifying to SQL Server at the time of installation. now we have discussed about the terminology what we are going to use in our SQL Server instance installation. So while we are doing, whenever that corresponding keyword or that feature selecting, we'll bring back to the presentation and we will have a comparison what we discussed, what we are selecting. Is it okay? Is it sounds good?
Yes.
Yeah. So now what we will do, we will choose one SQL Server version and we will do our system check, configuration check, and pre-requirements, hardware compatibility check and software compatibility check, and we will install a SQL Server instance. So which one you prefer? It's a default instance or named instance? So the server in my machine, I already have a named instance. Let us go with default instance. Okay, let us start our system configuration checker. So first, before I proceed with my SQL Server, I need to check my hardware requirement. So what are those? Let us go back. Yes, these are the hardware. The first thing is processor. It should require minimum of 1 GHz and memory. It minimum required 1 GB and disk space. So it required minimum of 300 MB. So let us do those things quickly. Yes, currently the system is having 2.70 GHz and RAM of 8 GB. Whereas coming to my disk is having more than 300 MB. So in terms of hardware requirement, so seems we are good, right? And .NET Framework, SQL Server native client, and SQL Server support files. So these are the SQL Server and SQL Server will prompt you to install. Okay, so I will go to add or remove programs. We'll check whether I have .NET Framework 3.5 or not. Or else you can check. You can go to SQL Server you can go to services. Here. So I do see Microsoft .NET Framework related components. Okay. So I have a developer edition with the evaluation one. So if you see, I am going to installation media. This is kind of very straightforward next kind of installation. So we will do it, and we will discuss the features. So whenever we get in our installation screen. So if you see here, you are having a x64, x86. So that means 32-bit and 64-bit. If your box is a 64-bit, you will go here, and here you will run the setup here in this. Okay. So similarly, 32-bit. But in SQL Server, you need not to check those things. If there is you can directly run the customized available SQL Server setup. So that based on your operating system, your appropriate setup will be executed. Just we will go to command prompt. I git system info. So here I can see my machine is a 64-bit operating system. The hardware related components we can check here, what kind of memory it have, what kind of processor currently it have, all the hardware related checks we can do from command prompt as well. I am running the setup, right click and run as administrator. So here this program has known compatibility issues. After this installation, apply Service Pack 1. After SQL Server setup completes, you must apply SQL Server 2008 Service Pack 1 or latest Service Pack before you run SQL Server 2008 in this version of Windows. So there are predefined compatibility issues. Those were fixed in the service packs. It is prompted us to mandatory to apply Service Pack after your SQL Server installation. I am running the program. Yes. So what we did a planning in that hardware components, security, and these are the planning related tabs. So you already checked hardware and software requirements, correct? Now we are in a installation step. So here, what kind of SQL Server we are installing? Are you installing a SQL Server standalone, or any features? Add node to a SQL Server and SQL Server failover cluster. This is one of the high availability. That is a cluster feature. So we will discuss the fourth or fifth module. Okay. So standalone machine. Select new SQL Server standalone installation or add feature to the existing SQL Server instance. If you see here, the minimum operating system version, restart the computer, few of the pre-checks it has taken. If it is all pass, then only our setup will be proceed for next step. Else it will prompt us. Let us say sometimes a computer restart is required. Let us say if I do any other software installation, to make it get affected, we need to restart the services. Even that is checked at the time of SQL Server setup. So we are receiving all pass. Support files. My machine, when here, let me go back to PPT. So we checked our hardware components and then the required .NET framework. It's already available. and SQL Server native client and SQL Server support files. So these are the software requirements. See, my SQL Server will ask me to install SQL Server setup support files. So I clicked on install. It is the setup support files related are getting loaded. Here all the appropriate setup file rules has been checked and loaded. .NET Framework and Edition and PowerShell, and only warning we got is Windows firewall setting. So warnings can be ignored. Next, proceeding next. See here, installation type. Perform a new installation of the SQL Server 2008 or add feature to existing one. So now I am performing a new SQL Server 2008 SQL Server. What kind of SQL Server instance I need? So here it is showing of the existing one. I am not selecting the existing one. I am selecting a new SQL Server installation. Proceeding with next step. So here it is asking for product key. Accepting the terms and conditions. Yeah, we will finish in another 5-10 minutes. Yes. If you see here, we were discussing multiple components: database engine, reporting services, analysis services, integration services, service broker, replication, full text test, and notification services. So see here the database engine. So what are the components you need? You will be loading it. So we told like integration services, reporting services, analysis services. These are the business intelligence related components, and the database engine is a SQL Server database. So any feature, if you want to add in future, you can choose the option add a feature to the existing instance. So in this now we are freshly loading a SQL Server database engine. So I selected SQL Server database service. I am not selecting any business intelligence studios. Those are the shared features. And to connect my database engine, I need to have some tool to connect it. That is the GA to operate, to work on my database. I need to have a tool, that is management tools. Management tools basic and complete selected. Clear here, selecting the features. So when we do a SQL Server installation, we discuss like we will have SQL Server DB engine service 1, agent service 1, and then browser service. If you do one time, you will see minimum of 3 services. In this example, first I loaded SQL Server 2005 and then I am trying to do SQL Server 2008. Now I selected features. So it should have SQL Server database engine, SQL Server agent service, and then it will not have browser service again. The browser service is a server level. What we here when we are discussing in PPT, the browser service listens for incoming requests for the SQL Server resources and provides information about SQL Server instance. Whenever a request comes to the server, it will read This request belongs to what instance, and the request will be routed to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. That's the reason browser service is a server level service. That means one service for all the instance. So if we have in this current notepad, we see 1, 2, 3, 4 SQL instances. Okay. For these 4 instances, we will not see 4 browser services. Only one browser service that will be installed when we do first time installation. Clear? For each instance, you will have SQL Server database service, SQL Server agent service, plus if you select any of the feature, reporting service or analysis service or service broker, full text, any other feature, you will see corresponding service. Okay, let us say for third instance, yes, we will see a SQL Server database service, SQL Server agent service, not browser service again. Yeah, here I have selected the features. So this will be going to the location, shared location. Here. Yes, default instance and named instance. So this is the place where we can select the type of the instance. Default instance. So here nothing is there. That means here the option is not available to specify the name to the SQL Server. That means the box name will be my SQL Server. So let us proceed with the default instance. Any comments from audience? Naga?
No.
So we can proceed with the default instance.
No, I think we need to go named instance.
Okay, in my machine, I have no default instance, correct? So
Yeah.
I am doing first time default instance. So when we discuss, a server can have one default instance, only one default instance, multiple named instance. So in this machine, I don't have any default instance now. So it will allow me to proceed with the default instance. Or else, if you want to have a specific name to the SQL Server, you can specify a SQL Server by selecting named instance. Correct? This is how we can specify name to our SQL Server. Or else you want to keep it as a default, we can select a default. I think. When I type more than 16 characters, it is not allowing. Right? We discussed here, there is a few considerations we have to think of selecting a named instance. It is a case incentive and characters is 6 and special characters, it is not allowing more than 16. So in the name of the SQL Server instance I selected as SQL Server 2008 instance 2. So in this we are installing SQL Server Developer Edition. So these are this location, we will select the location for the installation media and I will make it to D drive. Proceeding with next. So here it checked storage required storage compatible storage requirements. C drive it require 182 MB and D drive it need 203 MB. So in my machine I have enough storage, so we are good in that. And after that, services. So after when we here we discussed here, so whenever we do a SQL Server installation, you will see second time you will see two SQL Server services. Browser service will not get repeated, right? Here SQL Server database engine, here SQL Server agent service. The browser is already exists in the machine.
Yeah.
This is security thing. We need to specify to make a run of your service account. If you go to services.msc, here log on as, so either service should be running on local system or network system or any dedicated service account. So that means who all are having iBox, we can keep it run as service account. Will in my machine, so here I will see any other service is having service no. Okay, so let it as of now I'll keeping running on local system account. Later at the time of configuration we will switch it to our dedicated service account. When I select local system, it is not asking me to provide password here. Startup type, manual and automatic. So this account and service startup types we will discuss in SQL Server configuration. Next, here if you see the authentication mode, we have authentication modes too: Windows authentication and mixed authentication. Windows authentication only Windows users can able to see. Mixed authentication SQL plus Windows authentication. So authentication modes, two types of authentication modes here. So I will be installing in SQL Server in mixed authentication mode. If you see here, when I select mixed authentication mode, enter password is coming. So Windows authentication, the enter password list box is de-highlighted. So mixed authentication, SQL Server authentication and Windows authentication. Built-in SQL system administrator. That means what is the password of built-in SQL Server administrator? That is called SA. I am giving a password as SSWORD, password 123, all lowercase. Okay, and then add current user. So here I asked a question, why we have to consider security things while doing installation itself. Thing is that after installation, who all are can able to connect my database machine. So here is by default at least one member should be able to connect to SQL Server to do a configuration. That is, if it is a Windows authentication, the person who is performing the installation, that is add current user. If it is a mixed authentication, add current user plus the built-in SQL Server system administrator account, that is called SCA. I am proceeding. I have specified authentication type to my SQL Server. I am proceeding with the next. Here, if you get any error message, you want me to send to Microsoft for further support, not required. Now we are ready to install. We will recap the features what we have selected here. So here we have selected developer edition. So we are doing a installation, fresh installation, not adding a features to the existing. So what are the features I have selected here is the database engine. The instance is SQL Server 2008 INS2. I have given it as a named instance. It has given a name to the SQL Server instance, and these are going to a location. Instance directory is called D, program files, Microsoft SQL Server. Shared features are going to C, and error reporting false, and service accounts means after SQL Server installation, the SQL Server service, SQL Server agent service should be running on NT authority system, and SQL Server agent will be in a manual state. SQL Server database engine will be in a automated state after my installation. Here you will see who all are administrators after my SQL Server, that is current user, and what kind of security mode we are installing. The mode is SQL Server authentication and Windows authentication, that is called mixed mode. And collation SQL Server Latin General CP1 CIAS case incentive and asyncentive. This is the default collation settings. Any questions on this? The summary of our installation.
No questions.
Okay, so we will proceed with installation. So if you want to change any settings, we can go back and we can change it. So till now we have selected the features, authentication, instance type, and all the service account configuration related things, everything. Now actually we are ready to do installation. If something fails, if something happens, so what we have to do, where we can check? Here, if you see here, see program files, Microsoft SQL Server 100, setup, bootstrap log. In this location the summary file will be generated. So if you want to check whether my SQL Server installation is success or failure, or you want to validate my SQL Server installation progress, you can check that summary log. Before that, before I click on install, here what is 100? Pooja, if you are still there, can you try to give some answer for that?
No.
Okay. Okay. Let me click on install and I will explain what that 100 stands for there. Okay. So my SQL Server in the backend, it is loading the SQL Server databases and appropriate components. Okay. So we will go back and we will see what is that 100 stands for.
Okay.
That is called compatibility. In each version we are having a compatibility. So SQL Server 2000 is having a compatibility of 80. The SQL Server 7.0, the compatibility is 70. Whereas SQL Server 2005, the compatibility is 90. 2008, the compatibility is 100. The 100 stands for my SQL Server compatibility. That means my compatibility level is 100. That stands for I am installing SQL Server 2008. If it is SQL Server 2005, 2000, it will be that bootstrap file will be available in 80. If it is SQL Server 7, compatibility is 70. If it is similarly, if it,
Hello?
yeah,
Your voice is
Yep.
breaking.
Yeah, now are you able to hear me, Pooja?
Naga, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Naga, did you get what the 100 stands for in the installation bootstrap file?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Here. So my question, one more question here. I'm doing an installation of SQL Server 2008. So that means it has a compatibility of 100. So I agree. I see a folder of 100. Then why I still see 90 and 80? Any guess? Naveen, you are still there?
Yeah, I'm there, but I think those automatically when you install this 2008 and the before those files are automatically updated as my guess.
Yes. That is called backward compatibility. That means if I
Yeah,
run
backward compatible.
any, yes, if I try to use any feature related to older versions, that feature still should work in higher version.
Yep.
So in 2008, the backward compatibilities are 90 and 80. If you see when we are selecting the features, backward compatibility is also a feature. That is a shared feature. So that is the reason we are seeing here SQL Server 90 related components, shared components. Similarly, SQL Server 2000 shared components tools. Okay. Similarly, if you do a SQL Server 2012 installation, you will see a backward compatibility of SQL Server 2008, SQL Server 2005. Clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now our SQL Server installation is a success. The database engine is success. Click. Here is okay. Let us say if it is failed or it has reported any errors. Where to check? How can we navigate what is the issue? So the best thing is go to summary log file. The summary log file is available in C program files, Microsoft SQL Server 100, setup, bootstrap and log. If you open this file, you can navigate to the physical location, setup, bootstrap and log, summary file. This is generated on 6/22/8/20, my current time. So it has all the related installation related information. So first, what is our check, preliminary check? What kind of OS it is having? What bit? What is the instance type? Each by step, each phase it will show. If any failures, this is the best place to check. So here I don't see any errors, no errors. So our installation is success. Okay, so now I'm not going to continue with the configuration. So we will take it in a tomorrow session. So now in today's session, what we did, to have a SQL Server installation, before doing installation, what are the things we need to consider? So overview of SQL Server installation process and system level configuration. Okay, so what are the components we need to check when the SQL Server installation is in progress, and what is where the logs will be saved if any errors occurs. So where we need to validate. These are the things we check. We have seen in today's session. In tomorrow's session, what we will do, whether my installation is completed, how can I see when the installation is complete, what are the files it will generate, and how can I say my box is having SQL Server. And then we will do a configuration, SQL Server configuration. Configuration is nothing but making use of it. So let us say I have a cloth. If I make it a stitch with the proper measurement, I can make use of it. Until I stitch it, simply I will be having a cloth. Similarly, I have a SQL Server. I have loaded it. If I configure with my requirement settings, then we are good to use our SQL Server database engine. Any questions now?
No.
I'm expecting 1 or 2 questions in each session. Or else I will ask. You choose the option for you. Either you ask me or else I will ask at the end of session. Okay, I'll do one thing. In tomorrow's session, before we start, we will start our session with question and answers, so that will that help us in recording or recap our today's discussion, and we can take it further. Is it okay? How is it
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So the sequence, how I am following the same sequence, I will be sharing the notes with you. So after 5-6 sessions, the related documentation I will share with you, so that you can parallelly read, and if required, you can do a lab at your home. So tomorrow, if you want, we can have a SQL Server 2005 or 2008 one more time installation, and we can do configuration. That is up to you. If you are comfort with this installation today's session, we will directly jump to SQL Server configuration. Else we can do other default instance of SQL Server 2000 or 2005, and we will see it.
If
That is
possible,
open.
can you send us today's recording class so that we can install the SQL Server, like the software on our computer?
Sure. Is it Naga?
No, it's Ashwita.
Ashwita. Ashwita. So I agree. I
Yeah.
will inform Dharma to share the details. After this
Okay.
class, I am not expecting you to do your installation by referring this class. I am expecting
No,
you
like,
to do on your own.
yeah, we'll just do it in case, like, if you get any error or something, we can just refer to your class.
Sure,
In
definitely.
case.
I'll inform.
Okay.
And through Google,
Yes.
can we get the SQL Server 2008?
2008 evolution edition, you will get it. So we
Yeah, it is
discussed, right?
available online.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, different
Okay.
edition. Yes. So 180 days trial pack is available. You can
Okay.
download from there.
Okay.
I will check with Dharma if there are any repository where I can share the developer edition which I have. So if I find any passive response, I'll share this.
Okay.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
think we are on time on today's schedule. If any questions, so I'll be answering them. Else we should be good to drop off for the day. And tomorrow, how about tomorrow? It will be the same time.
Yeah.
So I mean, actually, I don't know much details about you guys. So you are, I mean, how the your day schedule? I mean, is it 1 hour in a day, a hour is fine, or is it okay if we can have a little more time? I understand most of the people are almost half sleep. Uh, so that based on your preference, I will try to schedule my day and I will plan it.
Will it be an hour class tomorrow?
Sorry?
Tomorrow class, is it 1 hour or 1.5 hour?
We can stick to 1 hour.
Yeah. Okay.
That is what. See, the same time, I will ask Dharma to schedule with 1 hour.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you send the recorded session to send today, so that we can read tomorrow morning?
Sure, I'll inform to Dharma. He is the organizer. He recorded the session, so I'll surely inform him to do the same.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you guys. See you tomorrow. Bye. Good night.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Srinivas.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.